Hi YouTube, Darth here. This is Yes or No, a weapon review series where I give a clear and concise answer to what weapons you should be using in Battlefield 4. Today I'm looking at the SKS Dedicated Marksman Rifle. This was probably one of my favorite DMRs in Battlefield 3, and I haven't given it much attention in Battlefield 4 until now. So let's get to the goods. Should you be using the SKS? Yes or no? Yes, and while this is one of the best DMRs, it's still a DMR in Battlefield 4. So this is a very borderline recommendation. First, I'm going to cover the positives of this weapon, particularly with respect to other DMRs. The SKS has the highest rate of fire of any of the DMRs. This is probably its #1 standout feature. The SKS is the king of spam fire, and the SKS's rate of fire helps it to offset some of its major deficits. At 333 rounds per minute, its raw time to kill is similar to the lower rate of fire assault rifles. Much due to its fire rate, the SKS has the fastest minimum time to kill among the DMRs at roughly 360 milliseconds plus travel time. In very nearly every situation, the SKS is a 3-shot kill, which is very consistent. If you start hitting limbs and going up against armored targets, the bullets to kill go up slightly to 4. The 3-shot kill is pretty typical for DMRs, but you can generally get this out in a few frames faster than other DMRs with the SKS. Now the SKS has a low spread increase per shot, and I say low because the spread increase per shot here is tied for the lowest among the all-class DMRs. The SR338 is actually better, but that is for recon only. Compared to all the other weapons in the game, the SKS is actually pretty high still. Comparatively, it's about 50% higher than even the worst LMG. So the magazine size of the SKS is pretty typical for the DMRs at 20 rounds. This means a maximum capacity of 21 rounds with one in the chamber. Even in the worst case for this weapon, this is enough to take down an entire squad of enemies. This comes in pretty handy when you manage to pull off a flank or if you're facing multiple enemies. One final advantage the SKS has is in mobility. The SKS is one of the more tolerant DMRs when it comes to moving while you're hip firing. Now this isn't a terribly huge advantage as the SKS in general doesn't have great hip fire, at least in comparison to the rest of the weapons in the game. But when you're on the move and surprised at close range, it can definitely come in handy. That's pretty much the best features of this weapon among the DMRs. Now let's look at what's not so good. For being a rifle, the SKS actually has a pretty miserable muzzle velocity of 490 meters per second. While not a crippling weakness, this makes it the worst of the DMRs and something you absolutely have to be aware of when using this weapon. You'll take shots and be surprised when you miss, particularly at range. Next, the left-right deviation of the SKS is the worst among the DMRs. The more you fire this weapon, the more unpredictable it gets when combined with the DMR spread increase per shot. It's not the worst in the game, but when combined with a lot of footwork, it can leave you out in the cold. That's pretty much the worst of it for the SKS, but I wanted to talk about the general weaknesses of the DMRs in Battlefield 4. While packing plenty of wallop and accuracy, the speed at which the DMRs can put out that damage is not very significant. Even the best DPS of the all-class DMRs with the SKS is only slightly better than the slowest killing assault rifle. It's on par with the worst of the carbines. So what does that mean? Literally every automatic weapon in the game will beat the SKS in a gun-to-gun, mano-a-mano fight. This is not unique to the SKS, it's a problem of all the DMRs. The one possible equalizer is the headshot, which is still not enough for the all-class marksman rifles. You'll still have to follow up with at least one additional shot. So the DMRs pay a price for accuracy, and they'll need that accuracy. But the SKS is not really about accuracy. I like to refer to the SKS as the spam king. Being a DMR, the SKS is a semi-automatic weapon, pull trigger and fire, and the spread that the weapon lets out rounds will depend on your trigger finger. The SKS has a recoil pattern of 0.7 up, 0.3 left, and 0.4 right. This is going to pull your weapon up and very slightly to the right. To counter this, you have a couple of options. You can pull down and to the left to counter it directly, or slow the rate of fire and allow your weapon time to naturally reset. And honestly, you really have to spam this weapon to feel any recoil at all. With only 2 to 3 rounds per target, you're really not going to feel the recoil in that short amount of time. But what you are going to have to do is to compensate for the movement of your target, which is not going to stay still while you shave most of its life away with each slow and repetitive shot. I think first and foremost, you have to recognize what the SKS is good at and what it is not good at. The SKS is the spam king of DMRs. You're not going to be lining up headshots and carefully tapping enemies down. No, you find a target, keep them in your sights, and let them have it. The further your target is, the more time you want to give your shots, but in general, I like to let loose with this weapon. Now let's talk range. At medium ranges of about 20 meters to 60 or so meters, the SKS is quite good. I find the particular sweet spot for this weapon is anywhere between 20 and 40 meters, so it's a consistent 3 shots to kill. And for the most part, this is going to be where you want to keep your enemies. A lot of times I had problems when I tried to get in close on enemies and use this weapon in their face. Like I pointed out earlier, the SKS loses to just about every weapon in the game heads up. This was a learning experience for me as I try to use the rate of fire to catch up at close range, but it's really not enough. Instead, keep those enemies at range, keep them unaware, and use the advantage of your accuracy to off them. And if that doesn't work, just more bullets will do. Looking at the relatively low scores per minute of most SKS players, the standoff route seems to be popular. But I'm not about to just sit back as I have to press the enemy. So I have to offset the major disadvantage this weapon has at close range. And for that, I think the G18 is a perfect complementary secondary. Whenever enemies close to within 15 meters or less, if I know they're near, I'll swap to the G18, which serves as a pocket AEK. And funny enough, it's got the exact same time to kill at minimum range as the AEK and reloads twice as fast. So the G18 is perfect for the in-your-face CQB action that the SKS is terrible at. If you find yourself at extreme close ranges with the SKS, the hipfire is definitely serviceable, but won't solve your problem if your enemy is already shooting at you. In general, I find the SKS is best for defending and posting up at a corner or cover and picking off enemies before advancing. You don't want to be away from cover if your enemy has a good shot on you, particularly because your time to kill is not amazing. So I make an extra strong point of trying to stick to cover when using the SKS, and in particular I find that this weapon is great on maps with lots of hard cover and medium sightlines like Propaganda and Zavad. Anytime I do a yes or no episode, I like to look up on BF4stats.com what the community is using and start my assumptions around the common thread. I cross-reference the players with their attachments on Battlelog to form a consensus. Well, I found out pretty quickly that there is no strong consensus on the SKS, but there was a most popular build for this weapon. The majority of players, and keep in mind it wasn't a strong majority, like to run the SKS with the FLIR 2X sight, target detector, heavy barrel, and angled grip. And this would make sense if this gun was all about being accurate at range. But it's probably the least reliably accurate of the DMRs. So doing some investigation at SimThick and going with my gut feelings from Battlefield 3 and how I like to play this weapon a bit more aggressively, this was my setup. For the optic, I recommend going with the HT33. This just barely beats out my second choice, the Cobra RDS. This has just the range push I feel is right for this weapon without removing the peripheral vision that the IRNV and FLIR scopes would. Now, I tried a huge number of different scopes for the SKS, and none of them felt particularly good for the SKS, so I settled in on the middle ground for my recommendation with the HT33. Next, a bit of a switch for me on the Accessory. Usually I recommend the laser, but in this case the target detector is just too good to pass on. If you don't have Final Stand, or if you're playing on hardcore, I'd instead run the laser sight. But the ability that the TDD provides to the player to pick out targets without having to spot is just too good. It's more reliable than actually spotting and doesn't suffer from the same spam spotting cooldown. Additionally, it helps to keep your target highlighted while you're trying to pick them off. Now, the next two attachments are going to be all about maximizing the advantages that the SKS does possess, mobility and damage output. First, I'm going to recommend using a heavy barrel with pretty much any DMR, and in particular the SKS. It's going to give you better minimum spread, less spread increase per shot, and less spread when moving. The cost is slightly more upwards recoil, and in reality, that's a pretty easy stat to control, particularly on PC. Next, I recommend the Ergo Grip. The Ergo Grip is going to give you half as much minimum spread when moving at the cost of a bit more time to reset your spread after you stop shooting. Big deal, 3 bullets are enough to kill just about any target. Remember, this weapon isn't about precision like some other DMRs, and the first shot recoil multiplier is not so atrocious that it can't be compensated for, so I don't see a reason to run the angled grip on the SKS. The combination of the heavy barrel and the Ergo Grip are going to give the SKS some nice mobility power. And remember, if the first 3 bullets don't take out your target, just keep shooting. Ultimately, the SKS is actually pretty friendly to a lot of loadouts, and I had relative success with a lot of setups, even strange ones that incorporated magnifier, silencers, and stubby grips. But I found that the HT33, TDD, Ergo, and heavy barrel was the setup that tended to work best for my playstyle. So the SKS is probably not my favorite weapon, and one I probably wouldn't use very often, and I probably wouldn't bring it when a suitable carbine or medium-range assault rifle would be more reliable. But if you're looking for a DMR to pick up, the SKS is a definite yes. It's not bad, but it's not great. It's a solid rifle, particularly if you're willing to take a little bit more care on getting yourself to a target. Pair it with a great close-quarters secondary, and you've got a magnificent beast of a combo. If you find yourself liking the SKS, you may wish to try the RFB, which will give you slightly better accuracy for a bit less rate of fire. If you want something more akin to the DMRs from Battlefield 3 and you're playing Recon, the SR338 is probably the best all-around DMR in the game. That's it for this episode of Yes or No. If there's something you think I missed, or if you have a different take on the SKS, please let me know. If there's a particular weapon you'd like to see reviewed on this series, leave a comment below indicating which weapon. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, YouTube.